Sajith Premadasa has done something even more difficult. He has taken on the Rajapaksa Raj up close and personal in the deep south. Of course, there's been a push back because of the achievement of the Rajapaksas with the war and so on. But still, Sajith is the only one who's been able to take them on in their own home turf. He knows what it's like to fight the Rajapaksas. And he has survived, and he's kept the UNP in play there. Now, any one of these two people can revive the UNP only if they happen to be the leader of the UNP. And I really don't think there's any other reform or restructuring that makes any sense. The only sensible move is to do with these two people. Either Karu has to be the opposition leader and Sajith the party leader, or Karu has to be the party leader and Sajith the deputy leader, or Sajith the leader of the UNP and Karu the deputy leader. But the fate of the UNP revolves around these two electable people. Ideally, both. I mean, there are no tickets in Sri Lankan presidential politics, but there should be a ticket with these two balancing each other off. But if not, one of the two, a choice has to be made. There's nobody else out there who's electable. I heard somebody, the national organizer of the UNP, saying, look, what's the problem? We have decided, our working committee has decided that Mr. Wickramasinghe is going to be the leader for the next 6 years.
6 years, yeah.
I mean, that's a joke, because for Mahinda Rajapaksa to be leader for 6 years, he's got to get the consent of a majority of the whole country. He can't just get some working committee in the SLFP to make him the leader. What kind of party says that, okay, we've got a leader for the next 6 years, rubber stamp, by a limited working committee, not by the whole membership of the party, not by a general conference of the party? I mean, nowhere in the world does it happen. In the United States, in France, the party votes on who the candidate is. Mm-hmm. But here, if a working committee can say, okay, 6 years, this person who's kept losing is the leader, it's not a democratic party, therefore it cannot restore democracy in the country. And it also shows a certain arrogance, because the nation has repeatedly signaled the UNP that it finds the present leadership totally unacceptable, and that it will keep penalizing the UNP so long as it has that leader in play. Now, if the UNP is not sensitive enough to the wishes of the nation, if it doesn't derive its mandate from the nation.
UNP did have leaders who really were the movers and shakers of this country.
Oh, yeah.
It had previous leaders. So to see the UNP from that sort of esteem falling, as you said, like a plane crashing, is, especially for people in this country where they had a strong opposition, it's rather saddening.
Mahina, the reason for that is that those leaders you're talking about came from within the party. But the present leadership of the UNP, Mr. Wickramasinghe, was a result of the serial assassination of UNP personalities by Velupille Prabhakaran, who killed off all the leaders, Premadasa, Gamli Disanayak, Lalita Adrat Mudali, even young Osia Begunasekara, Ranjan Vijayaratne, killed them off, and then very smartly stopped at a certain point. And of course, it paid off, because Prabhakaran then benefited from the CFA and the discontinuation of our deep penetration operations and so on, because we were, in a way, under Chandrika, we had begun to turn things around and we were making military headway. We might have won the war because she had sent deep penetration teams into the jungles. They had killed 8 LTT top commanders in 8 months, and they were going for Prabhakaran. Ranil's CFA broke that, stopped that. And Prabhakaran benefited from keeping Ranil safe. Now, so he didn't come from within a process within the party. And what is keeping him in place now? You have an amalgam of 3 ideologies at the top of today's UNP, which doesn't represent the bottom. There's a huge gulf between the base of the UNP, the shrinking base, and this executive committee, working committee, parliamentary group, this top tier. The top tier has 3 ideologies fused together. One, the UNP's old sort of pro-Western, elitism. That's one. The other, more dangerous, what I call the CFA, the mentality of appeasement of the LTT. And the third, there are some powerful people who have come in from the Sri Lanka Freedom Party. And those were the ones who spearheaded the so-called Sudu Nelum movement, which was an anti-war movement during the time that the country was fighting the Tigers. And therefore the armed forces did not have enough recruits. These people are also supporting Ranil within the UNP. So this amalgam of these ideologies has created a medium or an atmosphere like a petri dish in which Ranilism, the policy of appeasement, the anti-national profile thrives. And the masses, the voters see this. It's transparent. And they think, look, I mean, this man and this party leadership, the way it is, the profile, these people don't care about the country, they don't care about the people, they are not one of us. They don't represent the nation, and they stick with what they know. I mean, the tried and tested leadership of Mahinda Rajapaksa, I mean, which is, fair enough. Now, what the country wants is a moderate, patriotic opposition, more moderate than the government. I suppose in a way, Dasiri represents something, gives a glimpse of that. Vigneshwaran gives a glimpse of that. A center, reconstruct a center, moderate, liberal, flexible, able to defend the country in the world outside, but also be representative of the country, care about the people, care about the nation. A moderate nationalist alternative. And you have that in Karu and Sajid. And I don't mind who it is, but one of these two people can revive the UNP, and nobody else in the UNP today can do that.
As a conclusion, Doctor, I would like you to give me a political forecast based on these incidents that have happened over the past 2 weeks, which were, I think, critical weeks for Sri Lanka. We saw the TNA coming into power in the Northern Provincial Council, starting a new era of rule in the Northern Provincial Council. We saw the government securing the most number of votes in the northwestern and the central provinces, with Dayan Jayatilleka, who crossed over to the government from the UMP, securing the largest amount of votes in all three provinces. And then we see the UMP suffering massive defeats, not only in the north, but also in the northwestern and in the central province being one of its strong holds politically. And then we see the Democratic Party coming in, contesting for its first election, and obviously securing quite a substantial amount of vote to put it in the map and put it in the minds of all Sri Lankans. How would you forecast the upcoming elections for the western, southern and other provinces, the political environment and the mindset of the people going into those elections?
Well, if it's to do with elections, Mahina, and there's no change in the UNP leadership, I mean the replacement of Mr. Wickramasinghe, the bottom is really going to visibly fall out of the UNP at the next 3 provincial council elections. But if you're talking about the larger picture, you have a very serious situation. You have a government that is understandably popular within the cultural comfort zone of the Sinhalese and the southern 2/3 of the island, but doesn't understand a thing north of Vavuniya, and that includes right up to Delhi and west to Washington and so on. It just doesn't understand anything, and therefore we are headed for a collision with external reality. And internally you have an opposition that doesn't understand a thing about the southern 2/3 of the country. So you asked me for a forecast. I'm also a blues fan, and there's this blues guitarist Robert Cray, and he's got a track called The Forecast Calls for Pain. I mean, of course, it's a pun on Forecast Calls for Rain. So when I'm in a pessimistic mood, I think Robert Cray is right. The forecast calls for pain. But when I'm in an optimistic mood, I switch from blues to R&B, and Sam Cooke's A Change is going to come.
Well, Doctor, on that note, we conclude today's edition of Vantage Point. Thank you very much, Dr. Dayan Jayatilleka, for joining us as usual and giving us a different understanding of the political events that have taken place over the last 2 weeks. We'll see you again in a fortnight. Thank you very much for joining us. Goodbye.